referring to the visible church.
Okay, let's get to the visible church.
This is going to be real quick, y'all. It states the church visible is a term of Christian theology and ecclesiology referring to the visible community of a Christian believers on earth. Listen what it says, y'all. A visible church. It didn't say a church that you wish in or hope in that you can't see. Now, majority of people who go to these churches, I don't care what denomination you are, it's a church based off a visible church that you can't see, an invisible church you can't see. All right? This is where all these martyrs and saints comes in. Contrast to the church that's visible, which is defined under theology or ecclesiology, referring to the visible community of Christian believers on earth. So that means something you can see. All right? This is what we're trying to give to y'all. Something you can see. You can touch it. You can see it. You can feel it. You can partake of it. You can receive the fruits of it and not wait for it to appear out of the sky, out of the blue air. You know what I'm saying? Something you ain't got yet since the foundation of it. We're letting you know that what's your root or when hoping it had already been here. It never left you.
Never left.
Never left. Hey,
it's a church invisible. It's the English Church of England. Because all the authority that arrived from these branches that have broke off from the Protestant Anglican Church, which Roman Catholic, got their authority from the visible church called the Church of England.
Or the English
reformed from the English Church of England, going back to time immemorial.
Exactly, right before the Gregorian mission.
Right before the Gregorian. All right, let's go down. We're going to prove it. We're going to show you that the church visible and the church invisible, church visible and the church invisible are two different things. The church invisible is the church for King Edward the Peaceful, and the church invisible is that spook you call Jesus Christ. How we know? Let's go down to origin. Early Christianity. Let's go here.
All right. In early Christianity, anti-Gnostic writers such as Irenaeus or anti-Novatian writers like Cyprian of Carthage would often focus on the visible church in order to oppose various opinions deemed heretical. It was in this context that the expression extra ecclesiam nulla salus came about, which heavily insisted on the non-distinction between the visible and invisible church. And now,
the heavy insisted on the non-distinction between the visible and the visible church. So they're trying to act like ain't no distinction between the two. And I got a problem with that. We got a problem with that.
You have to, in point of view, like the king said, you have to know the difference, because extra ecclesiam nulla salus means there's no salvation outside the temple. And you know, today, many of our brothers and sisters like to use that abstract talk. My body is the temple. Show me one definition in any book out here that reference that the human body is the temple. Because it sounds good. I like to use that in my own whatever in private talks with abstract thinking. But in the concrete world, I have to utilize what it actually truly means, what a temple means. And it does not mean my physical body. So you got to get out of that.
The physical body is the most corrupt thing on this planet.
Exactly.
It eat, it doodle. If the mind don't tell a body what to do, it won't do a damn thing. Would it? It would sit on it, excuse my French, its ass and not do nothing without the mind telling it what to do. But the mind seeks to activate the body. Anything the mind does, the body should follow, not the other way around. And that's where we're in. The body is telling the mind what to do, instead of the mind telling what the body what to do. The mind, you can't even touch that. It's intangible, but still it guides the tangible. The physical.
Point of interest. This is why you all practice fasting and stuff to discipline yourselves, so that your mind and the will, right? Your will surpass your stomach, your bowels, your lower self. Your higher self, your mind, is guiding your physical. So it is in the attachment of your mind to your hereditaments as it relates to the birthright entail.
Absolutely.
You're not of this work. But there must be something in this world to remind you of what was not in this world. That's why you're called angelic beings.
Mm-hmm.
You're angelic beings. The stuff that we're telling you is absent from this world. It's here, but it's not being practiced. Why? Because the only way it can be practiced is by the very people who practice it, and these were angels.
Absolutely. Fallen
So if
angels.
you ain't doing this, then you got to question yourself: are you an angel or a devil? One of the two. Two classifications. Noble Ali told you. Who are you descended of? All right. So since we're dealing with the history of the faith of what we call the different branches of religious faith versus the religious church. I mean, the religious churches which could choose to be invisible or invisible. So we want to deal with the difference between the invisible church and the invisible church. The invisible church is a church that you can't see, you can't touch. All right. This is something that majority of 99% of the people on the planet Earth worship in, versus the visible church. All right. And the visible church goes back to 1st century BC. And you go back to 1st century BC, that puts you into a calendar called the Gregorian calendar. Pull it up right quick, Archbishop.
The Gregorian calendar?
Yes, 1 BC.
1 BC.
We're going to finish
But
off.
we're going back to the Christian era, 1st century, 1 BC.
All right, 1 BC.
Okay. When you're on your BC was a common year starting on Fridays or Saturday in the Julian calendar. Now, Julius Caesar was a Roman deity, right? So if Julius Caesar, if the Gregorian calendar was created by Pope Gregory XIII, and Julius Caesar used this calendar, that means that this calendar should support the existence of both Pope Gregory XIII and Julius Caesar. We don't, because we're back in the year 1 BC. We're not in the year where the calendar was actually put on the record, 1582. We're in 1 BC.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that Julius Caesar's calendar could not be validated because there is no 1 BC. We're about to prove it to you. It says that the Julian calendar, source difference, see leap year error for further information. And the leap year starting on the Thursday of the proleptic Julian calendar. It is also the leap year starting on Saturday in the proleptic Gregorian calendar. At the time, it was known as the year of consulship of Lentulus and Pisco, or less frequently the year 753 ab urb conditioner. The denomination 1 BC is for the year has been used since the early medieval period. You hear that? Medieval.
Mm-hmm.
Medieval. They jumped from 1 BC to the medieval period when they used the term Annos Dominios, and which means in the year of our Lord. Annos Dominios means the year of our Lord. Calendar error, which became the prevalent method in Europe for naming years. The following year is 180 and widely used Julian calendar, which does not have a year 0. So it'd be 0. So if we go to the calendar here, y'all, you see Gregorian year, 1 BC. Please listen very closely. If it's the year 1 BC under the Gregorian year, and the Gregorian year was not created, calendar was not created until 1582, that means that it cannot be the year 1 BC.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say it again. If the Gregorian calendar was put on the scene in 1582, then how could you have a 1 BC? How can you have a Julian calendar, if there's no 1 BC? Because the calendar to support the 1 BC story is the Gregorian calendar, which was adopted from the Julian calendar. But Gregorian calendar was not put on the scene till 1582. So that rules out any existence of any story that's told in reference to the Gregorian calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Because without a calendar, how are you going to tell your story? That's called a record. The word calendar means record book. That's what it means. So if Julius Caesar is out the picture and Pope Gregory XIII is out the picture, then we have to scroll down the dated calendars, ab urbe conditioner, ancient Greek era, 194 in the Olympe. This deal with the Greeks. When you deal with the Greeks, you go back to 303 BC. We're going to do that in a minute. We're going to pull that up in a second. You see Assyrian calendar. We're not Assyrians. Balinese Saka calendar. We're not Balinese or Saka. We're not from Bingo. We're Berbers.
Mm-hmm.
So our year is actually the year 950, which in the Gregorian year will be the 1 BC. Now that will take you back to the Christian area of 1 BC. All right, now scroll down to 1 BC and look what's going on, a birth. Religion, I mean.
All right.
Read that, y'all.
It says, chronology of Jesus, estimated birth of Jesus in the Christian religion as assigned by Dionysius Exiguus in his Anno Domini era. According to most scholars, Dionysius used the word incarnation. But
read that again.
It says, Dionysius used the word incarnation, but it's not known whether he meant conception or birth. However, at least one scholar thinks Dionysius placed the incarnation of Jesus in the year AD 1. Most modern scholars do not consider Dionysius' calculations authoritative and place the event several years earlier.
Okay, so he said that he wasn't sure it denote to actually conception of a birth, but incarnation, reincarnation. All right, that's called agnetic succession or autobiological memory. I reincarnated based off the memory of who I was in my past life. That's called incarnation. Why? Because the person looked just like me. So it said the estimated birth of Jesus. We're talking about the abstract story. Because we talk abstract story, because we're talking about the visible church versus the invisible church. Jesus Christ, what we're reading now, deals with the invisible church, the church you can't see, because ain't nobody seen Jesus yet, right?
Exactly.
If you ain't seen Jesus, you ain't seen his church. According to this story you're reading right here. All right, and it says that the scholar says that it placed the incarnation of Jesus in the year AD 1. AD means Annos Dominios, is the year of our Lord, or the year of Christ. But we just looked up 1 BC. Go back to 1 BC. So we're not even in 1 AD. We're in 1 BC. And what year is it 1 BC in the Berber year?
950.
This is 950 AD, y'all. Annos Dominios. Now check this out. If you start from 1 BC, right, and it's the year 950 in our calendar. Now, if we go to 1 AD, go to 1 AD. Y'all have to pay attention to what's going on. So you know you go from 1 BC, because you got to go up now. 1 BC to 1 AD. All right, so if you move from the year before AD 1, it will be BC 1. AD 1 or 1 AD or first century, Christian era. Didn't I say that? First century, that's the Christianity era. It's the epoch year for Anno Dominios calendar. It was the first year of the common era of the first millennium in the first century. So the first century, according to them, is in the Gregorian year is 1 AD. We know that never existed. Why? Because Pope Gregory didn't put the calendar for that time era till 1582. So the only year it can be in 1 AD is what year it says, Archbishop?
951 Berber calendar.
Now look at this. The 1 BC is 950 in the Berber calendar, and the one wait and the time 1 AD is 951 in the Berber calendar. So how could you switch from 1 BC to 1 AD, and the Gregorian calendar never existed, but in the Berber year is 950 to 951. And the only king that's ruling in the time of a birth of somebody called Jesus Christ was King of the Peaceful, and he was called the King of Peace. Jesus was also misnomer, the King of Peace. So it's only right, according to our calendar, to put that particular historical figure in the right place, because we're dealing with a visible church, not an invisible church.
Exactly.
So ain't nobody see the visible person of Jesus Christ, then you ain't see no visibility of that Jesus Christ church. But you did see the visibility of King Edgar the Peaceful, because King Edgar the Peaceful came to the throne in 959. How do I know that? Give me 1 second. Pull up Taffy Fish. Pull up Tacitus, Archbishop.
And up right now. Tacitus. Okay.
All right, read the first paragraph.
Said Publius Cornelius Tacitus was a Roman historian and politician. Tacitus is widely regarded as one of the greatest Roman historians by modern scholars. He lived in what has been called the Silver Age of Latin literature and has a reputation for the brevity and compactness of his Latin prose, as well as for his penetrating insights into the psychology of power politics. The surviving portions of his two major works, the Annals and the Histories, examine the reigns of the emperors Tiberius, Claudius, and Nero, and those who reigned in the year of the four emperors, 69 AD. These two works span in the history of the Roman Empire from the death of Augustus in 14 AD to 70 AD in the First Jewish-Roman War of 66 to 73. These are substantial lacunae in the surviving text, including a gap in the Annals that is 4 books long. Tacitus' others writings discuss oratory in dialogue format, Germania, and the life of his father-in-law Agricola, meaning focusing on his campaign in Britannia. Tacitus' Annals are of interest for providing an early account of the persecution of Christians and the earliest extra-biblical reference to the crucifixion of Jesus.
Yeah, I hear that, okay? Now, we just showed you we ain't talking about no spook Jesus Christ and the crucifixion of a spook Jesus Christ. We're talking about the visible church of the true Jesus Christ. And we're talking about Tacitus. Now, it says Tacitus' writings were based off Britannia. And we know Britannia was called Albion before Rome invaded. It was called Albion. And we know that Britannia was invaded by Agricola, who was the uncle of Tacitus. We see that?
Yep.
They just said that. Now, this is a book. I'll share your screen, Archbishop. Can they see me?
Mm-hmm.
How do I put my screen wide?
It's wide. You wide.
Okay. Can they see that?
You got to lift it up higher. Yep, there you go. Yep, we can see it.
This is called The Rule of Clan by Mark Weiner. I suggest you all get that book. But I'm going to read something out of this book to you in regards to Jesus Christ. And this Jesus Christ is King Edgar the Peaceful. All right? This is the title. From Kin to King. So from kin to king, state development of Anglo-Saxon England. It states, in 973, in the Abbey in Bath, a great Anglo-Saxon king lay prostrated before the altar, while the Archbishop of Canterbury wept with joy. The king was Edgar I, known as Edgar the Peaceful, and at 30, he was in his 14th year of exceedingly successful reign. Under his rule, England revamped its currency, streamlined its central administration, sustained its military authority over a once restrictive land, and recognized its county along lines that will remain essentially unchanged until 1974. I was born in 1970, y'all. The Archbishop of Dunstan a determined reformer of the English church. You hear that? A determined reformer. Did y'all hear that? A determined reformer of the English church and advocate for its monastic interests. Overcome by the English humility, he sang the hymn Te Deum through his tears. We praise thee, O God. We acknowledge thee to be the Lord. A half century, he will be canonized to be a saint. The occasion for King Edgar Pius's self-enfacement and Dunstan's joy was that the king's coronation. Tellingly, the ceremony was held on the day of Pentecost when Christians celebrated the descent of the Holy Spirit on the apostles. The age of the king the age of the king too was significant, the same at which Jesus began his ministry. The ritual will begin when Edgar, wearing a crown and holding a scepter, was led into an abbey by a parade of white-robed clerics. A crowd of priests, of the words of Anglo-Saxon chronicles, a throng of monks and consular sages. The ensuing ceremony was filled with all the pageantry of the great royal events in England today. The king would be anointed with the holy oil from an animal's horn. He will be given a ring, a sword, a crown, a scepter, and a staff as a symbol of his rule. And the abbey would resound with the joyous anthem from 1 Kings, the Zodiac priest, and Nathan the prophet. But in the constitutional terms, the most important part of the ritual came when Agur spoke. Shortly after clerics raised from him from position of humility before the altar, for it was then he swore his coronation oath, making a public promise, i.e. declaration or proclamation, to rule according to certain principles. His words have echoed loudly across constitutional history as the anthem of the Zodiac priest echoed in the Abbey of Bath that day. And the name of the Holy Trinity, y'all hear that? I promise 3 things to the Christian people, my subjects. He declared first that the God's church and all Christian people of my realm should enjoy true peace. And second, that I forbid to all ranks of men robbery and all wrongful deeds. And third, that I urge and command justice and mercy in all judgment, that the gracious and compassionate God who lives and reigns may grant us all his everlasting mercy. In modern terms, the king had pledged to protect the church, so safeguarding the public order by applying the laws to all persons regardless of their rank, and to govern according to an abstract Christianity idea of justice. So he even satisfied y'all. He allowed y'all to have an abstract worshipful faith.
Exactly.
He said Echo pledged his first coronation oath in Anglo-Saxon historical records. And though it may not have been the earliest ever taken by an English king, it clearly marked the Anglo-Saxon government coming a long way from the roots in a very different way of life. What are the preconditions for modern clan societies to develop the rule of law? What are the fruits of that transformation? The English Middle Ages, the story leading up to Agur's coronation oath and beyond, offers an important clues. To tell the story, we need to turn back the clock to the 1st century of the Common Era. There we find an archaic people living part. So, it says to tell the story, we need to turn back the clock to the 1st century of the Common Era. There we find an archaic people living in the edges of the Roman Empire in Northern Europe, a people known collectively as Germanic tribes. They are the ancestors of the Anglo-Saxons who share the blood and bones. Who were these forebears of the English? The various people of the Germans are separated from the Gauls of the Rhine and the Raffians and Pannonians by the Danube, and from, give me a second, I can't understand this. And from the Sarmatians and Dacians by mountains, or where there are no mountains, by mutual fear. So begins with Germania, a celebrated account of 5 written in about the year 98 by the Roman orator, public official, and historian Tacitus. All right, so there we see. They're telling you that in order to get an understanding of the time of King Edgar the Peaceful, you must travel back in time to the time of Tacitus. And we know Tacitus was the one who wrote about the crucifixion and and those events concerning the death of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. All right. Let's go back and share the screen. Okay, so Tacitus, other writers discuss oratory, Germania, and the life of his father-in-law, Agricola, the general responsible for much of the Roman conquest of Britain, mainly focused on his campaign in Britannia. Tacitus announced are of interest for providing an account of the persecution of Christians and the early extra-biblical reference to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. What we just read in this book by Mark Weiner, an attorney, a Rutgers law student, telling you that if you want to understand the story dealing with King Edgar the Peaceful, you want to understand who Tacitus was, because Tacitus wrote the story concerning the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, and the crucifixion of Jesus Christ goes back to the time era of the 1st century, and we know that's around the time era of 1 BC to 1 AD. But that story concerning Jesus Christ is not a true event, because we know that it could not be correlated historically factual, because there is no calendar to support that story, because that calendar was not put on the scene till 1582. Make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
All right. And one more thing, it says that according to Archbishop Dunstan, it said King Edgar was being led through the Abbey. What Abbey is this? Westminster Abbey.
Mr. Abbey.
All right. This is very important, of Westminster Abbey, because let's go to what I wanted to go to. Give me 1 second. Lost my train of thought. We're dealing with the visible churches versus the invisible church. And we know that the visible church is that going back to King Edgar the Peaceful, because he was a true king of the English Church, of the English Church of England. And we know that goes back to the Westminster Abbey. So with that, let's bring up what we call Westminster Common Faith.
Okay. Westminster Common Faith.
This is where your fake abstract worship came from. And this was instituted by de facto monarch under the House of Stewards under the Commonwealth.
Okay.
Let me,
Nobody got it. Here we go.
there you go. Westminster's Confession of Faith.
It says,
Read that.
the Westminster Confession of Faith is a Reformed Confession of Faith, drawn up by the 1646 Westminster Assembly as part of the Westminster Standards to be a confession of the Church of England. It became and remains the subordinate standard of doctrine in the Church of Scotland and has been influential within Presbyterian churches worldwide. In 1643, the English Parliament the British Parliament, called upon learned, godly, and judicious divines to meet at Westminster Abbey in order to provide advice on issues of worship, doctrine, government, and discipline of the Church of England. Their meetings over a period of 5 years produced a Confession of Faith, as well as a larger catechism and a shorter catechism. For more than 300 years, various churches around the world had adopted the Confession and the catechisms as their standards of doctrine subordinate to the Bible. The Westminster Confession of Faith was modified and adopted by the Congregationalists in England in the form of the Savoy Declaration, 1658. English Presbyterians, Congregationalists, and some others would together with others come to be known as nonconformists because they did not conform to the Act of Uniformity, 1662, establishing the Church of England as the only legally approved church, though they were in many ways united by their common confessions built on the Westminster Confession.
All right, let's go down. Historical situation.
Oh, historical situation. And the contents, okay, word scriptures. Salvation. So historical situations.
Yeah, it's still on the Book of Common Faith.
Okay. All right. During the English Civil War, 1642-1649, the English Parliament raised armies in an alliance with the Covenanters, who by then were the de facto government of Scotland, against the forces of Charles I, King of England, Scotland, and Ireland. The purpose of the Westminster Assembly, in which 121 Puritan clergymen participated, was to provide official documents for the reformation of the Church of England. The Church of Scotland had recently overthrown the bishops imposed by the king and reinstated Presbyterianism. For this reason, a condition for entering into the alliance with the English Parliament, the Scottish Parliament formed the Solemn League in Covenant with the English Parliament, which meant that the Church of England would abandon Episcopalianism and consistently adhere to Reformed standards of doctrine and worship. The confession and catechisms were produced in order to secure the help of the Scots against the king. The Scottish Commission.
Stop right there. Okay. So we know that Presbyterian was a result of the Church of Scotland, or which came from the Kingdom of Scotland. All right, that was started by what we call John Knox under the Kingdom of Scotland, going back to Kenneth MacAlpine the first. All right, so as we can see here, with the institution of Westminster Book of Common Faith, they actually instituted a Book of Common Faith for the practice. Practice was actually instituted under the fact of minor, established by the House of Stuart, or brought in the spookism of the invisible church established by the King James Bible. You follow? So, and all this was done in Westminster Abbey. All right, go back up. I'm sorry, go down to section 19.1. This should have chapter section 19.1.
Okay, section 19.
Chapter 19.4.
All right, it says, chapter 19 discusses God's laws and Christian ethics. The confession states that while the ceremonial and juridical parts of biblical law have been abrogated under the new covenant, the moral law as described in the 10 Commandments remains binding to all people. While true believers are neither justified or condemned by the law, it serves as a rule of life informing them of the will of God and their duty. The confession also teaches that the Holy Spirit enables the will of man to do that freely and cheerfully, which the will of God revealed in the law requires to be done.
Okay, I need you to chapter 19, verses 4. Chapter 19, verses 4 of the Book of Common Faith.
I'll pull up the book of chapter 19, verse 4.
Yeah. Because this is a practice was created in Westminster Abbey under the de facto parliament established by the House of Stuart under King Charles I. Now we know King Charles I was beheaded. He was executed as a result of ship money. And we know ship money was based off the taxes again. Just that Book of Common Faith 19.1. 19 chapter verse 4. Not from Wikipedia though.
Okay, oh, fine. Hold on, let me find that from.
Yeah.
So look it up.
Yeah, look it up. And put chapter 19, verse 1, verse 4. Verse 4, yeah. First one should be fine. Use the first one. Yeah.
Okay, pull it on up.
This is very close. This is why we keep telling y'all in hell.
All right, chapter 19, section 4. It says, nature of confirmation.
Hold on, one second. Chapter 19.
Oh, this is the same book.
It should be verse, now keep scrolling down. Keep scrolling. Keep going. Keep going. No, that's not. Let me find it for you. 1 second. Let me just find it. Can I send it to you?
Yeah, you can send it to me.
1 second. I've got it here. All right, watch this. Westminster's Common Faith. Coming out, Archbishop.
All right.
Very important to see this, brothers and sisters, because we're going to show you the visible church was usurped by the invisible church as a result of what took place in Westminster Abbey by way of the House of Stuart, by bringing on an abstract faith that was established for those who came here as a colonizer, we call North America, under the Anglican and Protestant religion when they broke away from the Roman Catholic, which in itself was based off abstract religion as well. Now, this is a law they created in Westminster Abbey in regards to the Christian faith of one of the branches that stem from the Protestant faith.
So I'm trying to get it to load up now.
Give us a second.
You actually, if you know how, you can copy that link and post it in the chat, and I can just click on it in the chat.
I don't even know how to do that. I could probably pull it up myself and come up quicker when I do it.
Okay, yeah, that'll work.
All right, I'm feature screen.
All right. There you go.
Let's see. I think I got it here. Excuse us while we get this information for you. Let's see. Let me just type it in. Westminster. Here we go. I had it there. Here we go. Sharing screen.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, Westminster Common Faith, chapter 19. Read this for me, Archbishop.
It says, you said 19.
This is chapter 19. Now go back to Westminster Faith first. Westminster's. Let me unpause first. And go back to Westminster Common Faith.
Mm-hmm. All right, you said go Westminster Faith.
Yeah, go back there.
Westminster Faith. Oh, Book of Common
Yeah.
Faith. All right. Okay, the Book of Common Prayer.
All right, go back to origin, background.
All right.
No, back up to history. History
History right
Yeah.
here.
Let's see. No, that wasn't it. Go back to, keep going up. When it talks about the church. Go right back to the very top.
Okay.
All right, for common praise. Let's go down. Keep going. Keep going down.
Okay.
Keep going. Keep going. History, go right to history.
I'm in history now.
All right. Okay, yeah. All right, yeah, right there. The former history.
Okay.
All right.
Let me see. I think I passed it.
Yeah. All right, let me do it. Picture on feature screen. Sorry about that. All right, this is the Book of Common Book of Common Prayers, Westminster Common Faith. All right, so this is what we're established in chapter 19. It says God gave. Now we're talking about
You got your screen.
biblical. Oh, 1 second. What the heck? Oh, here we go. Can you see that?
It's coming up now.
All right.
Okay.
1 second. Let me just go back to where you was. So to get the brothers and sisters a little clarity about how this mess was done to us. All right, here we go. Westminster's Common Faith. History and situation. During the English Civil War, 1642 to 1649, the English Civil War, King Charles was executed in 1649. This is in the year you started what we call the Commonwealth of England, or the Oliver Cromwell. It said the English Civil War raised armies in an alliance with the Covenanters, who by then were the de facto government of Scotland. Did y'all hear that?
Mm-hmm.
The de facto government of Scotland against the forces of Charles I. So there was the de facto parliament, and they were going against their de facto leader, Charles I, son of King James, all right, who was the sixth king of Scotland. All right, so now this is done with the origin of the courts of the Westminster of Common Faith. This is the faith that they instituted in Westminster Abbey in this time era. Let's go back here, the Book of Common Faith. It says, chapter 19 of the Law of God. This is their faith. This is their pamphlet that they went by. It says, 1, God gave to Adam a law as a covenant of work by which he is bound, by which he bound him and all his posterities to personal, entire, exact, and perpetual obedience, promising life upon the fulfilling and threatening death upon the breach of it, and enduring him with the power and ability to keep it. There's the scriptures to promulgate that for all those who've seen it. 2, this law, after his fall, continued to be the perfect rule of righteousness, and as such was delivered by God upon Mount Sinai, and the 10 Commandments are written in 2 tablets. The first commandments containing our duty towards God, and the other 6 others of duty to men. The 4 first commandments containing our duty towards God, and the other 6 of our duty towards men. You see the scriptures pertain to that. 3, besides this law, commonly called moral, God was pleased to give to the people of Israel as a church under age. Now we know the children of Israel goes back to who? Flavius. Josephus Flavius, who wrote the history of the antiquity of the Jews. So this is who we're speaking to. All those who claim to be of these tribes, we're speaking to you, who claim to be descendants of the children of Israelites. All right? It says, this is back in Westminster Abbey. A physical church, y'all. A visible church. This was being done under the Westminster Common Faith by monarchs of Scotland under the authority of the authority of the Kingdom of England, but not as monarchs of the Kingdom of England, because it said that the Westminster Common Faith was based off of de facto from descent from the house or the Church of Scotland.
Yep.
All right. King James was the 6th king of Scotland and presumed to be the first king of England. We know that's not true. Why? Because how he did it was de facto. All right. Now we're going back into a book that he promulgated in regards to the law that was given to Adam and Eve, called the 10 Commandments. 4 of the laws were dealing with the commandment toward God, and 6 were dealing with the duty towards men. And here's the scriptures to back them up. Part 3 said, besides this law, commonly called the moral law, God was pleased to give to the people of Israel a church under age. A church under age. A church under age, meaning a church minor in consciousness, awareness of who you truly belong to, or where you derive your origin from. Because he who writes your books does what?
Set your timeline.
Set your timeline. Okay? So the church underage created for themselves ceremonial laws containing several typical ordinances, partly of worship, prefiguring Christ, his grace, actions, suffering, and benefits, and partly holding forth diverse instructions of moral duties, all which ceremonial laws are now abrogated under the New Testament. That meaning that the old law is the old law and the new law is the new law, right? Under the law of God as demonstrated by Jesus Christ. How we know that? Let's bring this to Article 4. To them also a body of politics. You hear this? Spooks don't have a body of politics, right? You show me one scripture of a Bible or a pastor given in regards to a law that God gave them that can be instituted right here at the body of politics. Not just the body of politics, he gave them Sunday judicial laws, which expired together with the state. So those Sunday laws that were created by the state by way of de facto laws created by de facto monarchs, by way of them being subject to laws governing colonies under the laws of the king, who we are heirs and successors of. And they took away our body of politics, which have become extinct. Why? Because we're not in the right court of law. How we know that? It says to them also, he gave a body of politics, he gave Sunday judicial laws, which expired together with the state of that people, not obliging any other now further than the general equity thereof may be required. So what is general equity, y'all? That's called theonomy.